take it away.
All right, thanks so much, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Is this thing working? Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for having us. Thanks, Project 202 and XD, and thanks so much, Toby, and thanks, everybody, for taking the time to be here today. I really appreciate it. Today, we're going to be using self-assessment to grow an experience-driven organization, kind of share a bit of the insights into our experience growing Cariloop together over the past few years. Mainly, we're going to dive into the core strategic principles of being experience-driven, driving strategy with deep customer insights, making all customer touch points matter, and learning fast and experimenting often. I thought maybe I'd be standing up here much closer to the laptop when I was doing this, but so the experience today for us that we'd love to have with y'all is we're going to share some stories. We'd love for y'all to share as well. So we brought in some notebooks that you can take notes in, but we're going to start with actually the customer insights and share some assumptions. But at the end of that, we're going to turn it to the tables and let y'all. We have a couple of questions that we'll let you answer amongst one another, and then we'd love to hear that feedback or that information as well. Love for this to be kind of a two-way street here today. So
yes, please.
Jump into it. So strategic principle number one, driving strategy with customer insights. So we'll start with the first assumption. Actually, before that, interrogate, empathize, experiment. This is our process now. It's a little bit similar to think, make, test. For us, that kind of falls a little bit under the experiment side, but we didn't start here. It took us a while to get to this idea of deep understanding, interrogation, empathizing before we even start to experiment. And it started with some assumptions early on, this being the first one, which I'll let Michael expand on. But our first assumption was a searchable portal of health services would serve the needs of those caring for loved ones.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. So just to give a little bit of background on Cariloop, some context before we start talking about some of the assumptions we made early on. So when we talk about Cariloop today, we call it the world's first human-powered caregiver support platform. So we've built an experience with the gentleman to my right and my left. We crafted this experience for family caregivers for when they're trying to solve for the individual needs of taking care of parents, grandparents, spouses, siblings, in-laws, cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors, friends, domestic partners, children, whoever you're taking care of. We've built this platform to bring all of the family members and stakeholders into one place where they can securely communicate, collaborate across all their devices, store all the important files and documents they're passing back and forth, but then access a licensed or certified healthcare professional who's going to walk hand in hand with them as they try to put this puzzle together. Anybody in the room ever been down this path before, taking care of family members? Any words to throw out what the experience is like?
Overwhelming.
Overwhelming, I hear.
High effort.
High effort, stressful, disruptive, chaotic, overwhelming. I mean, all these things, right? It's hard. No one ever says this is an easy thing. So the company was actually founded in 2012, and when we first started, we had built a completely different idea. We started with a completely different idea. The original platform design was kind of a marriage of a Match.com and a Hotels.com. It was all tech-driven, no touch, and it was designed to help a caregiver self-assess kind of the situation that was going on, and based on how you answered the questions, we could guide you to the right resources or providers. Right? And it was a really cool tool. Imagine answering some what seemed to us like very basic questions about the situation you're going through, and at the very end of it, we could show you all the different things you were going to need and how you matched with them. Like if you're going through an A, B, and C scenario, you probably need assisted living, you probably need nursing care. Here's how you match with these providers locally. Click here to start. It was a very, very easy, seamless process to us for those that have been through this before. The problem with this, the assumption that we made and what we failed to recognize is, back to some of the comments in the room, is when you're going through this with a loved one, it's so complex and complicated that no questionnaire is going to get this completely right. A lot of times you don't know the answers to the questions. If I ask you, what insurance does your mom have? Seems like an easy question, right? But many people didn't know the answer. What type of budget are you working with? What services or amenities do you need? Basic questions, what we thought. But a lot of people didn't know the answers to these questions. And so what people started doing was they would either drop off at certain points in the assessment, or they would call our office and ask for help. Will someone walk me through this process? which was this completely radical idea to us. Like, we figured most people would want to just kind of click through and do this on a phone or on a PC or a Mac. So we started seeing this over and over again when we launched version 1 of the system. And as this kept happening, we started picking up, am I getting ahead of myself with the trends and the data?
No,
okay.
Go ahead.
We started picking up on this trend that we saw in the data and analytics related to when people were doing this. So the original assumption.
Oh, that one?
That I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves now.
Okay.
Yeah,
no.
no.
But the original assumption, sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
He told me I got to be quick with this stuff. I could talk about this stuff for hours. I'm so passionate. The original assumption with Cariloop was that we could create this kind of make your own journey type of platform where you could click through, answer some questions, and we would be able to match you up with the right type of providers. That was the original assumption.
Yeah.
And what we realized was it was the point of emotion. It was when they called and we saw that they were overwhelmed. That was honestly, that was the most important part of the user's journey, and it became the most important part of Cariloop as well. So we really honed in on that moment. The second assumption that Michael was leading into actually was that caregivers plan for and manage the care of the loved ones evenings and weekends. Like, we were building, you know, tech and thinking ahead, thinking, okay, we have coaches that work directly with members, like, you know, we got to find people who are okay with like evenings, weekends, things like that, right? We're kind of thinking ahead of like, what is this going to be like as we continue to grow?
Yeah, so then with this one in particular, as people were dropping off and we were watching this happen, we started getting all these phone calls. We're like, what in the world is, like, why is this happening? What's going on? So by accident, I can't even take full credit for like directly looking for this insight, but by accident, we started looking at everything, and you started seeing these patterns in the charts week by week where, again, the original assumption was that this is something that most people, because you're so busy during the day with work, kids, family, like, you know, all of our own stuff, that when something's going on with a loved one, you just don't have time to get to it, right? Like, that was the core assumption. It turned out we were completely 180 degrees wrong. Like, you know, when you're going through this is the only time to figure this out is during the day. This is the only time the doctor's offices are open, the pharmacies are open, the insurance companies will take your phone calls. Like, this is the only time you have to do it. So we started seeing these trends where actually Monday through Thursday between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. is where we saw peak traffic on the website. We're like, what? Like, how did we miss this? Like, what is going on here? And that light bulb went on at some point. It had to have been fall of 14, where we were like, they're at work. Like, duh. Like, they're sitting at their desk trying to figure this out. Like, we have this completely wrong.
And what was funny is we asked questions. Like, all the things you're supposed to do and go and talk to people in the whole 9 yards, we're asking questions and things like that. And even still, it was one of those things where as we started doing the service, started, you know, going and solving these problems, and creating, you know, folks are creating great experiences. These are just the sort of things that started to reveal themselves as we started to take a deeper look.
Yeah, and these two ideas, like, radically transformed how we looked at creating an experience for these caregivers and how we distributed the platform and how we built the business model and how we scaled that business. It totally changed the whole paradigm for how we thought about solving the problem. So this was all right around the time that I met these guys, actually. So all of this was happening right before I met Jason and Pete in fall of 14. And these guys came in and looked at what we were doing, and we started just re-examining all of these core assumptions and realized that we had a bunch of them wrong.
Yeah. Which was interesting. For us, this is fun. Like, having these insights, learning this means that we know what to do next and we can quickly move forward. So the third assumption that we had a ton of assumptions as we're moving forward. We always do, right? They're informed, but there's still hypotheses we have to test, right? The third one was more internal, and this is one that Pete and I, kind of realized. So we need to get feedback from our members, right? We have coaches that work directly with our members, the caregivers, and they establish great relationships. They essentially kind of become an extension of the family. And we thought, oh, this would be great. We have, we have people who already have great relationships. They're already getting, organic feedback from members. We have a quick little 3-4 question survey. We could ask, have the coaches ask the members to, take a survey at certain moments. And we talked about this with the coaches, and they were like, yeah, this sounds logical, right? Like, it was logical, but once it came down to actually doing it, what we realized with the coaches were not at all comfortable for asking for the feedback, like, not at all comfortable. And what was really interesting insight was the way they perceived their relationship with our members was one of helpful service, not selling. And in that moment, when you start asking back for something, it becomes a little bit more of a selling moment, and they weren't comfortable with that. It seemed to breach the trust that was there between them and the caregivers. Again, caregivers who are overwhelmed, right? Very, very emotionally involved in their caregiving, very overwhelmed, they just need help. And it was at that point, working with Pete and working with the coaches, that we decided coach and caregiver relationship sacred. Nothing touches that. So they're frontline of the organization. They're the ones working directly with the caregivers. We do everything we can to make them the hero in their moments, and we find alternative ways to solve that feedback question. And because we're big in touch, right? I like to call us SWAS, service with a service. Yes, service with a software.
Yeah.
Instead of software as a service, service with a software. So it's always human first. We created an avatar that automatically posts after a certain number of engagements, posting on our platform, back and forth communication with the coach, with human face, human character. It's illustrated, not actually a photo, because we don't want any confusion that this might be somebody else they can talk to. But that avatar posts. It's called Carrie. That avatar posts the feedback, right? So it kind of removes the coach from that sales role. The coach retains that relationship with them. It's still very sacred. They feel much more comfortable, and that's how we solve that. But that was a major assumption on our part, that even after talking directly with the coaches and learning, that they thought was a good idea, we learned when the moment came down to it, they really weren't comfortable. So now for the questions. What I'd love for y'all to, ask each other or answer for each other at the tables, or either of these questions. What are some assumptions that result in major insights once followed through? Or was there a really creative tactic that you used to reveal a major insight early on? Like, our goal is that y'all get really honest with each other and think about moments that you've had as you've been, building organizations, solving, problems, and just answer these questions with one another. We'll give you all a few minutes to do that, and then we'd like to hear some of those answers.
Go for it.
How about that? You guys had some pretty good conversation. What, you want to share one of the stories or insights or anything?
Come on.
Oh, okay. All righty. Go ahead, Richard.
Just for the group, if you don't mind, when you're sharing, just introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Reed with Freeman. Put on trade shows and expositions. And I was just about to tell the table that one of the challenges we often run into is that the folks that put on the events they get long-standing relationships with their customer. They work really well together. They spend a lot of time, talking about the ins and outs of the logistical delivery of an event. And then it'll come time to renew the business. and me typically coming in from an innovative standpoint to ask questions about what the goals are, that the customer has, and I get feedback like, well, we had a really great event, and well, tell me what do they want to do? Well, the event went really well, and so there's all these unconsidered needs and risks that they're not asking about, and then oftentimes if I can't get them turned in the right direction, they lose the business, and they're devastated that they were looking in the wrong direction.
Right.
They had done a good job year over year, but they weren't looking forward.
That's a really good one.
Thanks, Richard. Is there anybody else that had some insights or experiences that they'd love to share? There's got to be something engaging that's already come up with.
Safe space.
All righty.
Mark Lumpkin, I do IT for insurance companies. I was telling about a time where we were rolling out our first, we use independent agents, we were rolling out our first portal for the agents to get a quote for their customer. And so our automatic assumption was, well, they need exactly what we have. So we rolled them out our full portal with all the underwriting in there. And they're taking 8 to 10 minutes to go through and get a quote for their customer. And they just stopped doing it. We're not going to do this. They kept calling us. And so what we ended up doing is redesigning based on feedback that we got, and we gave them the bare minimum to get the number, and then they could come back if the customer wanted to go forward with it. They could finish the rest of the process, and we cut a 10-minute process down to under a minute to get that number for their customer.
Boom.
That's awesome. How did you realize to get to the bare minimum? Like, what was the moment you're like, we just need to?
At the point that they stopped using the portal.
Nice. Awesome. Awesome.
Really?
Thank you. We find
They run analytics. They just let us.
Yeah, that's perfect. We find the bare minimum works for us too. Pete and I like doing that a lot. It's like, what's the minimum we can do to try to get some sort of, feedback and everything. Thanks y'all for sharing. That was great. All right, strategic principle number 2, make all customer touch points matter. So for us, I'm a huge believer in it's not just customers, it's make all of our customer, partner, teammates touch points matter. I like to say that building digital product, it's like cooking, right? The people are the ingredients that generate the end result that the users are eating up. And if we don't enjoy the process, we don't understand the process, we don't enjoy working with each other, whatever, you can 100% feel that in the end result. And so we take a lot of time to apply UX principles internally to our complete process, working directly with the sales team, working with the marketing team. It's very much holistic, not just for the customer. One of the ways we do this is when we do orientations with new hires, the idea of being conscious of the moments we create for others, right? It's one of the things that we talk a lot about. We're all designing moments. A lot of times we think about the moments the users are having when they use the platform, but there's moments, we're having a moment right now, the moment that we're having doing this presentation in front of you, the moment that Pete and I have when we get together to work on something, the moment Michael and I have when he's telling me some of his business goals or whatever, like being very conscious of these moments and designing, again, applying that sort of experience thinking to those moments holistically, not only helps make those moments better, but it helps align the team holistically around the idea of being experience driven. Empathy and consideration.
Do you want to explain your title? Maybe?
Yeah, so my title at Cariloop is Chief Empathy Officer, and the next slide we're going to get into
a little bit how that works.
Yeah, a little bit how that works, but it's very similar to, I guess, a CXO for, I guess, more common term, but the idea of, again, being, empathy, really applying that thinking holistically. When I started working with Michael, it was important to me that this wasn't just applied to a product and that the Cariloop team was not familiar with this or aware of this, because I believe it's a thread that needs to run through the whole organization for us to be successful. And so when we talk about empathy, a lot of times it feels like the sword in the stone. There's a lot of, you can learn about it in whole yards, but when I read about it and see it being talked about, it feels sometimes like something that not everybody has or nobody, can attain. And so it feels a little bit out there. And for me, a lot of it's just being considerate. It's just basic consideration, like consider for a moment some of the actions that we're taking, some of the things that we're doing for our users, for each other, the whole 9 yards. So if empathy ever seems a little out of reach or, I don't have it, but they've got it or whatever, start with consideration. It's just very, very simple stuff. Holding a door open for somebody, giving up your seat for somebody, it's a great place to start. And I mentioned the idea of using user experience methods to better understand the goals, desires, even the journeys of each division within Cariloop. We walk through, with the sales team, our strategic development team. What are the experiences you have? When you go out and you're meeting with your customers, what's that experience like? What are you doing? What are you hoping the goals are? We're a big believer in making the other person the hero. How do we make them the hero in their moment? That helps. It really helps. And this all revolves around our value-centric organization structure.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. So when we made the pivot in 2014, when these guys got involved, when we pivoted away from kind of this all-tech model, one of the things that I also discovered, and this is me up here just, bearing it all to you guys. Like, one of the mistakes that I had made as a first-time entrepreneur was that I failed to properly define why we were doing the work we were doing. Like, I really thought this piece of technology was cool. I thought it could solve a problem. I thought it could monetize well, scale well. Like, those were all, I guess, decent reasons to try and jump into it. But one of the things I had failed to do was to give Cariloop a soul, a heartbeat, and really define why it was we were doing, what our vision was, what we were trying to change about the status quo of how people care for their loved ones. And so one of the ways that I went about doing that was I got these guys together, and for the first time we actually sat down and defined why we exist, the core values that we hold most dear to us, and really properly define a mission statement that we can use to guide us in all of our messaging and delivery of the platform. And so as that exercise came together, one of the things that I thought was, back to this whole idea of making everything experience-driven, was what if we actually designed our org chart based with the core values as the center of it? So instead of a vertical or horizontal org chart, what if we made it more spherical? That kind of denotes this highly collaborative environment we work in, where all departments have mutual respect for one another and they collaborate around these ideas of creating these moments for one another. So our value-centric organization model up above me, you see me in the center, whereas again, most CEOs are sitting up at the top in the ivory tower. I'm actually in the middle of it, or if you want to look at this kind of vertically, I'm actually at the bottom of it. So I'm down here if you want to look at this in rungs. And the next layer of support are the 4 core values for which are our 4 executives. We have a chief empathy officer, a chief innovation officer, a chief service officer, and a chief integrity officer. And from there, at that point forward, then you can see the interconnectivity between the departments and where they interface with the core values of the company and how those are responsible for the individual functions of the business. So where you have service, that's kind of where marketing, strategic development, and healthcare coaching intersect, or down kind of in Jason's area, or Pete's area, by empathy and innovation, kind of intersects around experience design, engineering, data analytics. So this was kind of how we chose to look at it. I've had Harvard MBAs and people look at this thing telling me that I'm crazy, this can never work, this thing's not efficient, like I've heard it all. And I think they're all wrong. I think this thing works great. The team loves this, like, you know, the culture we're creating, it's very, we work great together. There is that healthy respect, as Jason mentioned, for the moments that we're creating in strategic development or coaching or marketing or engagement. Like, everybody understands where the other person's coming from, which is, I think, is something that many companies, they fall short on. You don't really understand in engineering what marketing's doing or what biz dev is doing. So by creating something like this, we're feeling like we're actually going to move the needle on that. So this is kind of how we've chosen to look at this. And I can answer questions on this later.
And so far it's been working. I mean, we'll see how it continues as we grow, but so far it's working really well, and we'll adapt as needed. So here are the questions for this section. What are some of the moments in your process that have had a tangible impact with your customers, partners, or teammates? And did you intentionally design those moments, or did they organically come about? You just happen to recognize them as you were doing what you're doing. Already go. All right, everybody, I'm going to bring everybody back. We got about 10 minutes left, so I definitely want to hear some from some other tables. You guys sound like you got a lot of great stories over there. All righty.
Are you picking on Richard again?
Yeah. All righty, everybody. All righty. Y'all want to go again?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, here comes Toby with the mic.
This better be good.
That's right. Put you on the spot. There you go. Go.
This is Vijay. I work as a senior UX manager at Wheelpage. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys is that I had something.
Table, help him out. What was he talking about?
He had just gotten started.
Oh, really?
It was so good.
One of the things that we've built is called Experience Builder. It's we've always assumed that the property management companies would function the way we want them to be functioning. Like, we design a process and we define a workflow and then give it out to them, and then they will function in that fashion. But what we've learned is that that's not how it works. Every property management company has its own process in terms of how they would complete a leasing or complete a step in renting out or moving out people. They had their own process and regulations and forms to be filled out and everything. So what we've built is an experience builder, which is basically Trello-looking like solution that would allow them to modularize things, and it's an interface that will allow them to pull, drag and drop into a specific area, build that process basically, and gives them an understanding of how much time it would take for end user to complete that process. It would give them an indication of if it is going over an ideal experience, and if it is over like 10 minutes, it is like not a good experience. I mean, I'm just generalizing it.
Right.
But and then as they build it, there's another layer to it that would automatically build the components and things for them. So it's basically giving that power to the end users to build their own process instead of we defining the process.
Meet them where they are, kind of. It just, yeah.
Have you had success with it?
Just
started? Okay, cool. No, it sounds interesting. That's why I asked. Yeah, no, thank you.
Stay tuned.
Thank you for sharing. Alrighty, we got about 5 minutes left, so I want to jump to the third one real quick. So the third strategic principle, learn fast and experiment often. This is one where Pete and I work together quite a bit. We keep it simple. We ask a lot of questions. Really, it always starts with who and why. Pete is really good at asking what's the experience we want to have, which is awesome. Like working with a team to actually ask that question, from the get-go. Do you want to expand on that at all, or?
So, my background from an experience perspective. Thank you. We worked with Intuit and Scott Cook, and it was all user-centered design and customer-driven experience and CDI, customer-driven innovation. And then ultimately ended up at a company called Bottle Rocket, which created mobile solutions. They're a boutique shop here in Dallas. It was all about creating the experience of that moment for the person. So everything that we did from a technology perspective would always, kind of how do we create that moment? It's not about the bright, shiny, new gadget AI system we can plug into it. It was really more about, can we create that moment? How do we do it? And even to that end, it was even the simple idea of sitting down and saying, hey, let's do a pencil sketch it out, what is it, what are the interactions, how is this experience going to work, and then also thinking it holistically as well, end to end, notifications, back-end systems, for accounting, analytics, and so, but ultimately just the simple idea sketched out allows us to tell the story, not only internally to make sure that we feel it's the right way to go, but also as we go through the teams, I tell them the story and do empower them with the story so that they can execute when they're doing it, they understand the why.
That's a really good point. Yeah, being able to, with him asking what's the experience, being able to explain that to the whole team gets everybody to lean in. We're all building the same thing now. And this idea of focusing on a moment is really huge for us. So we pick that moment a lot of times, we'll back out of that moment. There's the moment, like the moment of the problem, what's going on, what the issue is, or the challenge. Sometimes there's the moment, well, what moment do we want them to have, right? What sort of experience do we want to create for them? We start with that, then back out. That really helps as well. Everything is 100% an experiment, and we iterate all the time. We're iterating all over the place. So this is an experiment for us, even doing this, right? Like that's just the mindset with the team. And when the whole team has that mindset, it really frees us. The idea of like think, make, test with test has a pass or fail. There's something interesting going on there when you think test, it failed maybe being a negative thing. For us, it's an experiment. Let's see what happens, right? We're going to test it, but we're going to learn from it. Fail is great. Fail a bunch, you learn a ton. We do it better next time. Prototype, build quickly, to Pete's point. We're penciling. We'll do whatever it takes to communicate the story to whoever we need to communicate it to so we can quickly get feedback. We've learned the idea of asking someone to imagine what something might be like is never as effective as putting something in their hands quickly and getting real honest feedback by watching them, listening to them, learning more about them. So the questions we have for you in this area is what methods have worked best for you to experiment and iterate quickly? And have you been able to consistently connect the idea of business metrics and user goals? Because Michael is involved in this process and he is completely embraced as a co-founder and CEO, like being experience driven, we're always asking, well, what's the business goal for this? Remember, our focus is B2B, right? Not B2C, right? So that's always important for us to be able to connect back to the user goals. All right, go ahead. All right, everybody, it's sharing time. Maybe. I don't know if the mic's on or not. Every once in a while, it keeps going like in and out. Can you hear me now? No?
Bring it in.
We're really eager to hear your experiences. All righty. We're going to pick on the back left table. Hey, Keith.
Hey, Keith.
Anything from that table you want to share? No?
We were just finishing over here.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm Chris, currently work at TGI Products, but previous life I was at Verizon Wireless. One of the practices that I still use but haven't implemented here is we would iterate and build prototypes, and because we always want to test to go to usability, which costs a lot of time and money, we would go to Starbucks and we would buy coffee for 10, 15 different people and I would be there with the developer, and we would walk through a certain amount and iterate while we found things back that tend to be, with user testing, after 6 people, you start hearing about the same things. So we would iterate, and every few weeks we would just continuously go back to area Starbucks and do more testing. And then we would launch that stuff live on our site. And then we would do more testing through testing parties and other things with larger audiences and
Very cool.
That was really cool.
Yeah, cool test.
That's really cool. We appreciate y'all sharing all this insight information of your experiences. We'd love to open it up to open Q&A now if you guys have any questions for us or anything. With remaining time.
I have one question.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm Tim. I work for MoneyGram.
Hey, Tim.
So my question is, so your business model sounds great for the customer, providing value for the customer, but when it comes to like establishing numbers and everything, at the end of the day, it's a matter of investment. So how exactly do you balance your customers and your investors?
How do we balance customers and investors? It's a loaded question for the 10 minutes we have, but I guess that the root of the question is, again, how does the model work? And I didn't really get into this, but we distribute mostly in the employee benefits arena. So we sell directly to large corporate employers as part of their health and wellness program. So we're signing 3, 5, 7-year contracts with brands like Brinker International, Service King, New York Life, VML. Where's some other ones? Like we have a pitch this week to the NFL. We're working on with big brands to offer the platform to all of their former players, caregivers, employees, members, whoever it is. So from an investor standpoint, investors love long-term subscription, recurring revenue models, which we have. And with the platform, the way we've built it, the way these guys have it set up is that the future of the platform, the way it looks is we're going to be able to start plugging in other revenue-generating products, services, platforms like Amazon for food delivery services, Uber or Lyft for mobility. We've talked to Keith back there about RefillWise being part of the program as well. That's kind of how we look at the future. And of course, our investors love that idea as well. You can really increase the lifetime value of that user. You've already got them and they're already paid for by the employer. Now it's just how can you really continue to monetize that. So it's a good question. It's probably, I need more time to really answer it the way you want it to be answered. I'll be here after if you want to talk about it some more.
Hey, yeah, I love your model where you're starting off with why, and I've been teaching for 18 years at the college level, and Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Jay Shu.
What's up, Jay?
But one of the things I've noticed is that students are not asking why. It seems like our educational system is set up for what? What's the answer? And as long as I memorize the answer, then I'm educated.
Yeah, and if you're lucky, how, maybe, if you're lucky.
I'm curious, I think maybe that's why some of the academics are disagreeing with you, because it's against the way that they form their own structure. But I'm curious, and Bill and I were having this conversation earlier, as your company grows, do you think you'll run into the same thing that a lot of large enterprise companies go, that the bigger the boat, the more focus is on efficiency and cost savings? That seems to be a trend, and how does your model go to scale? That's kind of my question.
So I have some thoughts.
So
that's a great question, and I have the same frustrations that you do. We have kids, and I want them to be critical thinkers. I don't want them to just be followers, right? Like, ask why, understand, right? Seek to understand before being understood. So we think a lot about that. The question of how do we scale this thinking. This is why I love the model that Michael started to present when he started thinking this way. And I was like, oh, I fell in love with it. And I'm like, this is how you grow an organization, right? I'm hoping that as we continue to grow, again, if it's all an experiment, we're all learning as we go, then when we do the orientations, every single time we do a new orientation with new people that come in, we figure out ways we can tweak it. We ask their feedback. How did you like the orientation? What did you learn from it? And so I think it starts, I think for us, we're lucky because we are still growing. We're early enough we can lay this groundwork and this foundation and then grow it from there. So I'm hoping that by having this as a thread that currently already runs through, and we keep it going as we go, we just avoid the situation where we hit a point of that's just the way it works, right? That's just the way it's always been, which just completely, I think, kills innovation and new thinking in the whole 9 yards. It's very important for our group to be open to. Openness, 100%, in one of the values and things that we look for in people that we hire. If you're open to new ideas and you're open to failing, you're open to experimenting, it becomes fun. It becomes a lot more fun and interesting, and less fear-based, right? Which I think a lot of scenarios are fear-based. Like, I hope I don't get fired this week if I don't meet as opposed to, let's go make this better together.
Yeah. Yeah, good question.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think the difference is the mindset of the organization, and you're hoping to continue the mindset, because I think there is a lot of fear in big companies.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think there's a certain size where that just naturally happens. So the question is always, how do you deal with that, I guess.
Right.
Keep firing.
Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, great.
Hi, this is GMD from Huawei Technologies. First of all, really thanks for the presentation, brainstorming. Really enjoy it. One thing I like most, I guess, Michael, is your organization chart, the crossbar. I really enjoy it, particularly when you mentioned how the CMO, marketing officer, and
go back to it.
Officer, how do they work together, right? But you also mentioned some traditional thinking guys think you guys, it doesn't work that way, right?
It's like what Jay's saying.
Can you give us some more, maybe elaborate a little more? For example, I do not see a CTO in there, right? Or CTO office.
And maybe that's a good place to start. Like, I had to convince these guys that these were good titles. Like I promise they're good.
So maybe allow me one question. For example, a lot of the things we talked about so far sounds to me is more like a day-to-day type of work, right? But for long-term strategy, for example, technology planning, business strategy, where does that organization adopt fit in your metric structure?
So this is like Michael said, we went back and forth because there were moments like this where these don't necessarily mean everything to this side. Right? It always depends on the audience at the end of the day and what you're communicating in that moment, right? Back to a moment. And so the CIO really for Peter is like CTO, like Chief Empathy Officer for me is more like CXO, so it's kind of how I think about it. But honestly, Chief Empathy Officers are working. When we're doing our awareness and growth and promoting, like it's picking up interest in people who are now interested in Cariloop because it exists. I'm okay with that. The goal is success of the business.
Well, it gets people asking the question too,
right.
Like, can you explain this? And like, you get to talk about the core values and
so
put it in that.
You just asked about, Pete does all of that. He's very good at considering these sort of things for the future. It's never day to day. It's always, yes, there's things we have to do today, but then how does that impact like tomorrow, right? It's deconstructed.
Yeah, so
I guess we did sort of skip our backgrounds. Sorry about that.
You start with the values. The companies are all about the values. What are we doing? We're trying to remove the stress from caregivers, right? And so we have this fundamental idea. And with that, it goes to the experience design. So you're saying, well, what does this have to do with the technology? So ultimately, what are the things I worry about? I worry about the security and that the information is protected, right? I worry about the experience is always good from the time they register and log in to, and they come in and out, to the notification and how that works. Making sure that all that works smoothly from an operational perspective.
Managing the engineering team, teams,
yeah. But from a strategic perspective, we have that larger direction, but from a just from an operational perspective, right now our organization is really a little more nimble in terms of startup. I always think of it more startup at this point as we're transitioning to what we call a big boy company. But the idea is that we look quarterly at what are the experiences that we want to do, what are the things that we want to try and accomplish. So we're juggling operational stuff along with for the experience, as well as kind of where do we want to move the platform, where do we want to be, and then recognize that underneath all of that, to kind of go to this gentleman, Tim's question earlier, we've been worrying about the efficiency of the coaches throughout that process. What's that experience? We get them to do the right things in the right moment, put the right information in front of them so that the coaches themselves can scale. So we're always looking at that in the designs and the experience as well as the way we operate.
One thing I'll point out, I don't know if you guys counted how many times our CTO has said experience in his explanation. I mean, that's the strategy. If everybody is talking experience, the tech is a tool. just like everything else. And if everybody, I think at this level, is talking experience, and we share that with the people that we work with internally, we hear them say it. They say things like, oh, this moment was a good one, right? When we want everybody to think about those moments and be conscious of them, when we hear that they're naturally saying it, like, I think that goes, that's what we want. Because as we grow, then I think it spreads.
So as you can see, this is why I was excited for Cariloop to present today. And so at this time, I'd love to present you guys with something.
Oh, thank you.
This is just a token of our appreciation that says in recognition for shaping the experience-driven mindset, and we appreciate you investing, your time and your knowledge into your peers in the market. And so again, just a small token.
Thanks, Toby. Appreciate it.
We really appreciate you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it a lot.